Hi everyone, my name is Vlad, and together with my colleague Chris here today, we are going to discuss about the cybersecurity threats in the current landscape as we have experienced them in this current year, specifically around multi-factor authentication attacks. But before we start, I would like to offer you a quick introduction about ourselves. I am a cybersecurity expert working for Modular Services, who is an IT managed service provider specializing in penetration testing, Microsoft Azure, Azure migrations, and cloud security. Mainly Azure because this is most of what our customer base is currently working with. And over to you, Chris.
Hello, everyone. I'm Cristian. Again, I work with my colleague Vlad. I am a Microsoft Cybersecurity architect, an Azure Solutions architect, and I currently work as a Security Operations Center manager for the same company my colleague is working, Modular Services, who basically offers security services mostly in the legal industry area. And of course, today we are going to talk about MFA, multi-factor authentication, bypassing multi-factor authentication, and lastly, we are going to talk about methods or technologies, solutions we can use to actually try to mitigate this type of attacks. So I'll let my colleague Vlad get into it.
Good. So at the beginning of the year 2020, the way we work has changed forever. As you know, many companies adapted to remote working, and in order to support their workforce, they had to basically adopt new technologies that they were, or maybe were not fully comfortable with, or in which they had no prior experience. And that is when we also noticed a staggering increase in cybersecurity attacks that stands true to this day. So by the end of 2023, according to an article published by Forbes, there were around 343 million victims as data breaches rose by 72%. The average cost of a data breach is around $4.8 million, with more than 35% of attacks being delivered via email. Now, you may think so, one may think that these attacks were highly sophisticated, but in reality, the most common attack vectors were and still are phishing, security misconfigurations, such as basically even leaving your environment with default security configurations would be considered a misconfiguration nowadays. So also compromised credentials is a big part of this. As more and more companies are on a journey to adopt the cloud or extend their capabilities with hybrid workloads, the importance of a solid security baseline is paramount. So we say MFA is no longer the universal answer because we've experienced it and we've seen it during audits. Many companies just, let's say, tick this box that, okay, we have MFA, but there is a bigger discussion here in regards to having multiple layers of security, especially in the current threat landscape. You cannot simply base your, let's say, organization's protection just on a single method. So we're going to discuss about what solutions we have for that part. I also have prepared a short demo for you today, so you can experience such an attack taking place from the eyes of a threat actor. We're going to be using a popular tool developed by Kuba Gretzky. I'm sure everyone heard of it, Evil Jinx. And because I didn't have faith in the demo gods today, I've pre-recorded everything. But the reason why I've pre-recorded everything is actually something that's called a fishlet. And you can come find us after the talk and we can definitely show you how this works live and how the fishlet looks. This fishlet is basically a special configuration file in Evil Jinx that takes into account all of the endpoints and controls the endpoints that the end user is accessing in order to proxy their requests to an attacker's server. So basically the attacker server acts as a man in the middle, delivering the end user the expected results while also capturing the information that we need, like passwords, credentials, and session tokens. So let's kick it off. this fishlet file changes quite often, so if, for example, if I configured it last week, now today, there might be issues with it because the domains that we target change quite often. Let's see how this looks on the screen. Okay. I'll shortly explain what's happening here. So once you have the fishlet file, you configure a domain that you own as an attacker. In this case, I've configured quarantine.microsoft online, which is misspelled, obviously. Most of you already noticed that. It's Microsoft O'Neill, but yeah, that's called typo squatting. And it actually, from a, let's say, mental point of view, it plays with your brain's ability to correctly read misspelled words if the letters are arranged in a certain manner. That's called typoglycemia. So besides configuring this domain, that is usually something that you notice in your inboxes, having emails from microsoftonline.com. I've also configured an external IP address that we're going to use to proxy the requests. And also, everything's going to happen over SSL 443. Okay, next one. So once we have the domain configured and the IP address of our attacker server, we configure something that's called a lure. And a lure is sort of a bait. It's actually the URL that we're going to send to our victims in order to capture their credentials. In this case, as you can see, after configuring the lure, we get the domain that we can use for this attack. And also, behind the scenes, EvilJinx is using Let's Encrypt to create SSL certificates for all the domains that we are going to proxy in this request. And the attack is going to be based on a Microsoft organization that's using Office 365. So our victim here, Alex, who is working on his tasks, notices he has an email in his inbox from quarantine.microsoft.com and Microsoft Security. And you might have noticed these sort of emails into your inboxes as well. And hey, look, it's something about a payroll, so we might need to check it if we want to get paid. And he checks the link, does a good, let's say, due diligence, but doesn't notice the misspelled domain. He seems to be a bit careful with the message. And as he now goes to review the message, he is going to be prompted to authenticate using his credentials, username, and the password shortly. And he is also going to be prompted for MFA, but not the simple push notifications, number matching, which is an extra, let's say, step, an extra layer. This is happening on his device, on his personal device that he enrolled MFA with. And as he confirms the prompt, he is redirected to the, let's say, proxied official Microsoft page where he can interact with all of the applications at his disposal. And, for example, he clicks on Outlook, and this is the email it all started from. Now, back on the attacker side, not only that we got Alex's credentials in clear text, but we also got his session tokens. And the session tokens, or the cookies, are the summary of actions that Alex took. He entered his credentials, username, password, and MFA. And with these cookies, we are basically able to impersonate Alex, and we become him. And if there is no, let's say, custom monitoring in place for this, you won't notice this attack because it's his token, right? So as an attacker, we use something, an add-on called Cookie Editor, and we import the cookie that we have that we have captured with EvilJinx. And all we need to do at this point is refresh the page, as we are completely bypassing MFA and we are logged in with the compromised account. Obviously, getting access to everything that Alex has access now. And you might have noticed in the left side of the pane, which is going to be something that we're going to go back to. Also, Alex had admin access in his organization. This is another important aspect in regards to segregation of duties. You don't want your, let's say, normal users to be administrators, and this is happening in this case. So Alex has access to all of these important administration panels like Exchange, SharePoint, and basically by stealing this token, we have compromised the entire organization. We don't even need access to their endpoints to, let's say, get a remote code execution on any of their workstations because we already have access to all of these documents. And as a threat actor, this is what we want. We want access to information, and we want to be able to sell this information or extort the organization in order to gain monetary value out of them. Good, so what is the answer then? What can we do to protect ourselves? Well, as I was saying in the beginning, a layered approach to cybersecurity is a must. And I'll let my colleague Chris here discuss the, let's say, blue side of things and how an organization needs to at least have these base configurations when they deploy a tenant in order to have a layered approach to security to at least slow down the attackers in their tracks and have monitoring in place to capture what is happening before you get fully compromised, because it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. So you want to do everything you can to make sure that you at least slow them down and you get a chance to detect what's happening in your environment. Chris?
Yes. So as my colleague Vlad was saying, there has to be a layered approach to security. And first of all, we think about how our Alex user in this example got compromised in the first place via phishing email, right? So there are security measures in place that you can put in place to mitigate, at least reduce the amount of phishing emails that your organization gets every day, like implementing email authentication, SPF, DKIM, and DMARC, like properly configuring tools like Exchange Online Protection, and we're referring here to Microsoft native tools, but there are, of course, other tools available out there that do the same thing, that have the same results. And here we're talking about quarantining and blocking these phishing emails, and of course, as Vlad was saying, reporting, monitoring, and alerting, because this is very, very important. Now, on the user account side, given the fact that, again, referring to a Microsoft environment and an Office 365 environment, the user is residing in Entra ID, formerly known as Azure Active Directory. There are here as well technologies, native technologies or security solutions that we can put in place to mitigate this type of attacks. So, for example, the first one would be conditional access, right? We have the options here to leverage conditional access to restrict user access based on several criteria, like location, like device compliance, if the devices in that organizations are also enrolled in Intune. In Intune, you have the possibility to create compliance policies and to specify the criteria that would make a device compliant. And then in the conditional access policies, you can specify that a user from your organization could only access resources from the organization only if he's coming from a compliant device. Okay, so that device would need to be, first of all, enrolled in Intune, have a compliance policy assigned, and meet all the criteria defined in the compliance policy to be able to render it as compliant. Sign-in frequency is another thing that you can use in conditional access to basically require the user to re-authenticate periodically, depending, of course, on the application or applications that you apply these conditional access policies to. And now there is a new, let's say, feature in conditional access called token binding, which basically allows you to bind the token of the user with the device that he's logging in from. So basically, if my token, my primary refresh token, will get an additional layer of security by specifying the device that I'm logging in from. And if I try to log in from another device, that token would be rendered invalid immediately. And of course, separation of duties, exactly what my colleague was referring to. And here we're talking about not using, for example, the simplest way to put it, not using the standard accounts, the standard user accounts for administrative tasks. And those separate administrative accounts, again, there are solutions to apply just-in-time access, like privileged identity management, which is another native solution from Entra ID, which basically allows you to assign roles to accounts on a limited period of time, and you can also apply additional layers of security. For example, if my admin account has the global admin role assigned, before I could use this role, I need to go into this privileged identity management solution, elevate my account. On elevation, you have specific tasks that you can implement. You can ask for a business justification. You can ask the user to perform an additional MFA prompt. And only after that, my account would get this global admin role, and it would be for a limited period of time, again, which is customizable in the solution in privileged identity management. And of course, multi-factor authentication that needs to, that is a must nowadays. But again, this multi-factor authentication, we need to configure it. We have the options in Entra ID, again, to configure, to require phishing-resistant MFA, like FIDO2 keys or certificate authentication, not only the number matching MFA, which is the default now for Entra ID, but we can create additional conditional access policies, let's say, that we can apply to privileged accounts to require phishing-resistant MFA, or at least device-based authentication, passwordless authentication. But yeah, there are a number of solutions and technologies that we can put in place to basically control security around the identities. This concludes our presentation, and please, if you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer.
Yeah, so you mentioned as a recommendation to increase the sign-in frequency, but at the same time, when we demo it, that was actually the vulnerability, because you enrolled a new user with the sign-in. So isn't like just going passwordless and making sure the user never inputs a password the right approach? I'm just curious what, because it's a contradiction here.
So, if I understood the question correctly, passwordless authentication would be the right approach to mitigate these types of attacks.
Yeah, and not asking user to re-authenticate.
Yeah, I would say that it is a big step forward, but it doesn't necessarily completely mitigate this type of attack, because going back to our demonstration here, if the user Alex would have logged in and would have had a passwordless method of authentication, right? It would still, the tool, Evil Jinx, would still capture the session token of that user, regardless of how he or she authenticated. So basically, that token would still be valid. But for example, if we put in an additional, let's say we go passwordless and we put in an additional conditional access policy in which we also require a sign-in frequency to re-authenticate that user, basically that token would be rendered invalid after that specified period, or even better, if we would have used the new preview feature to basically bind the token to the device from where the user logged in. When Vlad, the attacker, would have tried to log in from a different device, that token would have been rendered invalid immediately. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you for your presentation. There is a step that I didn't quite understand. So after the attacker extracted the credentials, how did they bypass the basically the numeric code that was sent to the phone?
Let's see if this works. Yeah, good. Right, so after the user got prompted for the numeric code, right, the attacker didn't need to bypass that or to know what that number is, because the end user already had his device. And the way this works is it's basically what you expect to see as an end user, right? You log in to Office and you expect to input your username and your password and be prompted for MFA. And you have all these means at your disposal, and you confirm them for me as an attacker. Now, the way this tool works, it takes into account the sum of all these actions that you take as a user, right? So you have the username, the password, and the number, and it compiles them into a cookie. And that's what Microsoft does as well. It's not something that Evil Jinx does, let's say, extra in order to compile that cookie. So when you actually, let's say you don't necessarily follow a phishing link and you log in normally to Microsoft, in the backend, that's what's happening. You create that authentication cookie in order to pass, so you don't, let's say, you're not prompted to re-authenticate every time you access a different Microsoft service. If you access Outlook or SharePoint, if you have that token, you are not prompted all the time to re-authenticate for every different service. Now, Evil Jinx does the same, but it has the ability to capture this cookie. And when you have this cookie, you basically become the identity that created the cookie. In this case, it was Alex. So you don't need to know the numbers. You don't need to. The user simply needs to click on the link, perform the usual authentication flow, and then you get all the information as part of the tool.
So the user actually performed the valid authentication in this case. And if you're asking specifically about those numbers that popped up on the screen, that's the method of multi-factor authentication used by Microsoft, okay? So basically, you would get on the screen the numbers, and you would have to input them on your device on which you have the authenticator application installed, and that's how you perform MFA. So basically, the user actually did perform MFA and got a valid session token from Microsoft, which the tool captured and reused it, let's say.
Yeah, and at this point, there was no device validation involved?
No,
so
there was, that's what we were saying. Yeah. These are basically the default configurations, which are not good. They need to be properly configured.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. You have showed us ways of defending or preventing the attacker, but after they already have access to the systems. I'm curious, are there ways, especially now that AI is so evolved, of
preventing the email getting into our, let's say, spam or even the inbox. I already know that we have this email is outside of your organization, but yes. That's what I would say. What I was saying when I was talking about configuring, for example, Exchange Online Protection, which is the native Microsoft tool to, let's say, email filter solution, the native email filtering solution. In the default configuration, as you saw, probably many phishing emails would slip through the filter. But if you properly configure the tool, there are policies, there are threat policies there that you can configure. There are lots and lots of settings that you can configure to basically get to a point where a high confidence phishing email like this would get blocked by the Exchange Online Protection tool like 100% out of 100. Usually, companies these days implement, besides the native tool, okay, they implement an additional email filtering solution which work with the different technology like behavioral heuristics, like they're looking for patterns in the email, they're looking for the rarity of the email. For example, if a sender never sent an email within your organization, that email gets flagged automatically as suspicious. So basically implementing a couple of such tools would get you to a point where the phishing emails would slip at a minimum, let's say. Hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. I have just a small idea, but why Microsoft cannot limit any type of links in emails? It's supposed to be the best solution in the next world. So maybe could be triggered by a filter, so any email will not contain any links, because this is even worse from now on. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Any security solution out there on the market, any security solution is not bulletproof, first of all. Secondly, it goes back to the default configurations that I was talking about, because there is a feature in Exchange Online Protection, for example, which is called Safe Links, which you can enable and configure and would detect this type of suspicious links, let's say, and it would either block them or flag them as a warning to the user, depending on how you configure the tool. And that's what I was saying to the last person who asked the question. If you put in an additional tool, it might catch these links that are slipping through the native solution. So yeah, it's a combination. There's no simple answer to to that. Probably Microsoft would probably be better in a better place to answer that. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Could you please expand a bit the idea of the device pinning for tokens? I'm curious because once I'm able to capture the token and I can reuse it, what stops me from simply spoofing the device ID from which I'm using it? Thank you.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
I think
So
I can answer that.
you understood it? Okay, thank you.
I got it. So, yeah, that's a very good question. And until this point, there was no possibility to basically defend against this sort of attack. Now, the way token binding works, it creates a unique hash of the hardware ID of the device that was used to authenticate when you created that token. That is not visible anywhere, and that cannot be, let's say, spoofed in any way, because at the moment, there is no tool that can capture that, not even Evil Jinx. So even if you capture the token, because you will capture it, the algorithm will detect that you are not, or you have not created that token or that session cookie on the device that you're trying to authenticate from. And the binding itself, the algorithm behind the binding itself will detect that basically you are coming from a non-compliant device because you don't match the identity of that device the same way this physical device has a harder MAC attached to it.
Okay. So actually, the hash is on the Microsoft servers. It's not part of the token.
It is not something that you can control.
Okay. Thank you very much.
And it is not even something that you can understand at the moment in terms of how they compute it. It's not a simple, let's say, MAC listing of the IP address. It's a combination of, let's say, device compliance, device policies that you have, the location, the IP addresses that you're using inside your organization.
Yeah, it's clear, yeah.
And the device probably is registered or joined to that specific Entra ID, and they have this backend computing algorithm.
Hello, thank you for the presentation. I have a curiosity because I worked in an architecture that had this in place and it was great, right? But I was curious if when the token is invalid, does an alert trigger for the actual user or for the actual admin?
It doesn't trigger by default, but it creates a log, a specific log that is, you can monitor these logs and you can create custom alerts based on them using tools like, for example, you can stream all the logs, the sign-in logs. I mean, you can either use the native Entra ID sign-in logs or you can stream them to Log Analytics. On top of Log Analytics, for example, you can configure Microsoft Sentinel, which is Microsoft's cloud SIEM solution, okay? And there you can actually create custom queries using the Custo query language to create specific alerts based on these types of logs, because these types of logs have a specific flag in them, okay? And other ways would be to use, again, if you're using Microsoft tools, to use Microsoft Defender, Defender XDR, which also you have the logs there, and you can use a feature called Advanced Hunting to search for these specific events and create an alert out of them. So this would be some solutions from the top of my head, let's see.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I was thinking, the token binding is one method to stop it, but before that, I was thinking with AI, how it's evolving. We can detect maybe when the device user agent changes, or if it's unexpected behavior. For example, the user normally does this action and this actions, and now all of a sudden the user just reads everything.
Yes, that's why I was saying in the beginning that monitoring is a big step here, and there are other tools that we haven't mentioned in our presentation. For example, we could create a conditional access that would require device compliance. We could configure in Entra ID another security tool called identity protection, which basically would alert if a user would log in from 2 different devices, for example, in a short period of time. And you would get an alert. If that alert is investigated, it would, but again, the device would, the user would already be compromised at that point. But conditional access based on, it's a combination that you can use before this token binding. Conditional access based on location, based on device compliance, and sign-in frequency probably would stop this type of attack. But now, with the new token binding, which is in preview for the moment, this attack is basically mitigated, let's say.
Yeah, if I can add to that just a bit, is in terms of AI enhancements to detecting this, let's say, sort of attacks, you know now Copilot is everywhere. You saw Microsoft Ignite. You saw that they basically introduced this Copilot into every aspect of their products. This also ties into risky users that is managed in a similar way by detecting, as Chris was saying, the locations that the user has been using to authenticate, the IP addresses, and the sum of actions that he took that maybe are different from his usual login patterns or his usual behavior while he is authenticating to that workstation.
And that user would get a higher risk score, and you also have the possibility to configure conditional access policies based on the user risk score, and to block access or re-challenge that user for multi-factor authentication, or even initiate an automatic password reset for that user.
Thank you.
Thank you as well.
I have a question. Wouldn't it be possible for the attacker to create a virtual machine and host the actual website, and they basically just have access to the website directly and don't need to copy the cookie, the tokens or anything? Wouldn't that be a way to bypass all of those protections, even the AI, because the actual user would be using the website through the VM? So how would you protect against that?
That's a very good question, and the answer to that is, let's say, burned domains. And that term is quite interesting, and it also happened to us while we were conducting this sort of attack. So the attack that you're referring to is basically a clone of the official website. You send a link to the user, it looks legit, he clicks on it, and you directly get the information that he is inputting into the, let's say, authentication form without having, let's say, a man in the middle, right? At that point in time, for one, many users would find it suspicious that they are not logged into, and we get reports from users from our sites that may fall victim to such phishing attacks, and they tell us like, look, we accessed the site and I was supposed to log into a specific page, but that did not happen, so I think I might have clicked the wrong link. Now, there's another aspect to that besides user reporting itself. Let's say they don't report it. You get flagged pretty quickly if you host, let's say, a clone of a legit website. And that's called burning your domain. The domain itself is only good for, let's say, 2-3 attacks until somebody analyzes it in a sandbox and notices it has malicious intent. They report it, your trust score decreases, and then basically when other users are trying to access the phishing link, it's either no longer valid or you get a prompt for, let's say, Defender Smart Screen saying that you need to be cautious because this website is impersonating a legitimate business. Now, there's another part from an attacker point of view that you can use to bypass that, and that is buying legitimate domains and domains that are old, because usually attackers register a domain and the SOC teams are looking at, okay, let's see, what is this domain? How old is this domain? Okay, it's 10 days. Yeah, looking at creation date of the domain. But there's also a possibility to extend this sort of attack that you were discussing. There is a specific website that lists domains that are going to expire that you can buy that were registered maybe in the 90s, and you can buy those. And when you look at that, okay, it's a domain registered in the 90s and it has good reputation. Nothing happened up to this point on that side, and that's pretty dangerous as well.
Thank you very much for your time, and have a lovely day during the conference. Thank you.
Thanks.